Welcome to our Appalachia. My name is Phil Conn. I'm your host for this series, and today we have a very special presentation. We're at the Derrickson Agricultural Complex, which is a part of Morehead State University. And as you can see behind me, it's sorghum making time in eastern Kentucky. So we thought we'd come out to the field and show you this process. The Morehead State University Agriculture Department is very excited about keeping this tradition alive in eastern Kentucky. So each year they produce sorghum in conjunction with area farmers. So we want to show you a little bit about it. Behind me we have a very special mill, which is mobile, as you can see. So these gentlemen are pulling the mill around the sorghum field, pressing the cane, and of course getting the juice, which is subsequently cooked into sorghum. Let's watch the mill for a while and see how it processes the juice. I'm here with Eddie Lundergan, who is the farm manager here on the university farm, and he of course is overseeing much of this process. Eddie, you got quite an impressive operation here. It's a good time for cutting cane, isn't it?
Yeah, it sure is. We're trying to beat this frost, and I believe we're going to be able to do it.
Great. We've just been looking at the mill here. That's an impressive rig. It's a far cry from the old mule walking round and round.
That's for sure.
Why don't you explain to us basically how this mill works and why you have it rigged up this way?
Oh, I'd be glad to. For a lot of the people that know about cane or sorghum making, they're probably more familiar with the mill that sits right by the furnace or where they cook the sorghum down. This mill belongs to the fellow that's making our cane out here this year, Marvin Brown from Greenup. And as you can see, we bring it right to the field. It's driven by power takeoff from a tractor. A small horsepower tractor could actually handle the mill, 25, 30 horsepower tractor. As I was saying, we bring it to the field. As you can see, we got our cane cut. The leaves have already been stripped from it. The tops have been cut out of it. And I try to keep two men. I won't run the machine or the mill without two people because, as you know, with any of these mills or anything power takeoff driven, there's always a chance that somebody can get caught in the thing. So we have two people there for safety reason, and then it makes the work go twice as fast too. But as we run it through the mill, you can see the fodder or the stalks there that have been ground out. We have a pump on the back here that runs through that garden hose into that tank there. That tank holds 200 gallon. We'll fill that tank up and we'll take it to where we're cooking it down at. We'll pump it into another holding tank where then it's gravity fed into then another holding tank where it's then distributed out into the pan where the sorghum's made. With this process, we're straining it 6 times. So
I see. We're really going through it. I guess one of the advantages, too, of pressing it right here in the field, you can leave the fodder and it cuts down on the handling, doesn't it?
Right. It also cuts down on the amount of times you handle the cane. The 3 years prior to this that we made cane out here with, we had to cut the cane, strip it, and carry it over to the farm to where we're making it. And then, as you said, we have all this old shaft and fodder that once we got done making, we'd spend 2 or 3 days cleaning up after that. Where it is out here, I can just bring a disc in and knock it down and go on.
Well, these students have already raised a lot of cane, and now they're trying to cut it down because, as you know, it's needed for the mill and eventually to make into sorghum molasses. This looks like a good way to get a college education. Let's check and find out. What's your name?
Laurie Farmer.
And you're an agriculture student?
Mm-hmm. I'm a junior.
Well, do you do this every fall, or is this your first time?
This is the second time I've done it, but the first time I've ever cut. I helped them make it at the mill last year.
Do you ever help cut tobacco, too? That looks like a pretty mean knife.
No, it's the first time I've ever used one of these things.
All right. Let me ask your friend over here what she's up to. You know, this cane looks awfully naked. Why in the world is it so long and lank?
Well, we took the leaves off so the leaves won't go through the mill over there.
I see. And where are you from?
Cleveland, Ohio.
Are you an ag major here?
I am.
And what's your name?
Carla Paskett.
Well, looks like you're doing a good job. Staying ahead of the mill, at least.
Yep.
Let me get on down to this fella. It looks like we've only got a women crew, so I guess we need at least one token male to talk into the mic. What's your name?
Rusty Klein.
Where are you from, Rusty?
I'm from Frankfort, Ohio.
I see. Well, looks like we got a whole Ohio gang out here. Have you ever cut cane before?
No, never have.
So this is an interesting process for you.
Yeah, it's different.
Right. Do you work at the university farm regularly?
Well, I have a workshop out here, and I live out here.
I see. Well, thanks a lot for talking with us.
Thank you.
We're on the Derrickson Agricultural Complex, and we're taking in the sorghum making of Morehead State University, something that's becoming a tradition for Morehead State. And I have with me Bob Wolfe. Bob is a professor of agriculture at the university, and he rides herd on this whole operation and has been doing an excellent job. Bob, tell me, why is Morehead State University involved in something as old-timey as sorghum making?
Well, we service a region in Kentucky of some 34, 35 counties. And even though we are interested and would like to see new things in progressive agriculture, we're also interested in some of the old traditional kinds of things that have been going on since the settlers moved into the mountains of Kentucky. And we feel like that we're sort of carrying on a tradition with the sorghum enterprise here.
Mm-hmm. Do you find that there's a market for sorghum molasses still?
Certainly, there's a market for it. Although certainly that's not our major objective here at the university. We're interested in it from the standpoint, as I said, of the tradition and what kind of familiarity or the way that we can reacquaint some of our students, or maybe some of them acquaint them for the first time with this type of thing.
Well, when you talk about traditions, you discuss sorghum with old-timers around here, and to them, sorghum was the sweetener at the early part of this century. It wasn't a matter of choosing between Domino, refined, and sorghum. Sorghum was it, almost from top to bottom in sweetening, along with honey, I guess.
Long sweetening, I've heard it called from the old days.
Right. And a lot of the old-timers refer to sorghum with an S on it. They speak of them sorghums.
Them sorghums. Well, I don't date back quite to that, but certainly I can remember as a youngster growing up down in southeast Kentucky, remembering the old-timers that would bring in their sorghum mills on the wagons, and they'd set up in the community, and they'd be there for a week or 2 weeks, and they would make the molasses for everybody in the community. That was my first acquaintance with it, and very frankly, until the last 7 or 8 years till we got into it here at the farm, I'd sort of gotten away from the thing, and I've remembered a lot of those things since we've gotten back into it here.
You did then in southeastern Kentucky have traveling sorghum makers. They had custom make sorghum in effect.
That's right. They were custom makers, and they would travel throughout the county down there and move from one farm to another. And I know we grew some sorghum when I was a kid.
Is the university willing or inclined to get into that kind of service in this area, do you think?
Well, we've had some questions along that line, and it becomes a matter of whether or not we can work it into our operation. Just yesterday we had a gentleman from Fleming County stop by inquiring if there would be some way that we could make some sorghum for him. He has about an acre and a half over there, and was finding it difficult to get it made. And I don't know really. We couldn't do too much of it, Phil.
Well, you know, this is a very interesting combination of techniques to me. We're going to move back to the pan in a minute, but I find that you have some things that are as old as sorghum. Other things are new innovations. Tell us some of the ways this operation varies from the traditional way of making sorghum when you were a kid in southeastern Kentucky.
Well, I think you've probably already seen the operation out in the field. As I recall it from my childhood days, the squeezing or the milling of the plant was done with a mule. And we have the gentleman, Mr. Brown, that's making the molasses for us here this year, has brought in a portable mill that we are using to grind the cane in the field, and we don't bring anything here to the evaporation pan except the juice, and we leave the pulp out in the field. That saves us some labor once or twice handling those cane stalks. When you get down to the actual making of the sorghum, we're filtering it, the juice, I don't know, 5 or 6 times before it comes down to the pan. So we're getting a lot of the I don't know that you'd say impurities, but a lot of the pulp and this kind of thing that you are going to get into it.
Things that end up being brown flecks if you're not careful.
True, very true. And then we're putting it into the pan here, and the old-timers, when it got ready to come out of the pan, when it was so-called made, I guess they got ready to stir it off, as the old-timers would say. They sort of looked at it, and they judged by the bubbles, how it was bubbling in the pan, and they'd get it up on their paddle, and they'd see how it strung and how it dripped off, and then they'd, by some intuition, I guess, say, well, it's ready, it's done, and then they'd draw it off. Well, we're doing it a little bit differently from that, as Mr. Brown will tell you, in that he pretty well judges the temperature. He'll measure the temperature there of the sorghum in the end of the pan where it's getting ready to be taken off, and he won't bring it out of there until it gets to be a pretty warm temperature, about 110 degrees centigrade, which is quite a bit over 212 degrees Fahrenheit, which most of us are familiar with.
too hot for your tongue.
Yes, sirree.
Thanks a lot, Bob. Okay, we're really in the middle of the action now. For those of you who don't know, this is a sorghum pan, and the old-timers call this a stir-off. And as you can see, we have two cooks hard at it. I'm here with Marvin and Betty Brown, and they are sorghum cooks par excellence, and this really keeps you moving from top to bottom of the pan. Marvin is from northeastern Kentucky, I understand, and is overseeing the cooking process today. Where are you from, Marvin?
I'm from Greenup in Greenup County.
I see. And is this your first year to help Morehead State University with sorghum making?
Yes, this is the second year I've made sorghum and the first year with Morehead.
Right.
Glad to be here.
Well, you've already been pointed out as an expert to me, so it didn't take you long to get with it. Yes. How did you learn the process of sorghum making?
Well, I'm not really an expert, but I had beginner's luck, I think. Last year we had about an acre or an acre and a half of Dale cane, and it was excellent variety. And we had real good luck with it, and we made some excellent syrup. This year we had about an acre and a half of the same type, and we've already made it down at our house, and so now we're up here working for Morehead.
I see. Well, we're really glad to have you on the campus, and it's good to have someone that knows how to cook sorghum. And Betty, do you get Marvin to cook this well when he's home in Greenup?
No, not hardly.
But he really knows how to run through the sorghum. Marvin, I tell you what I want you to do. If you will explain to us from the point the green juice flows into this pan, exactly what does all this maize represent? What are you up to in this cooking process?
Okay. As Bob told you, the meal in the field gets us the juice into the tanks. And as the juice moves through the tanks, it has different steps of filters that it filters through, and then this is our juice coming into the tank, into the pan. Our pan is, my pan is 3 bars longer than this pan. This is a 21 bar pan. The juice comes on back here, and this is our fire box immediately under the juice. And at this point, the juice is about 100 degrees centigrade, and at this temperature, the juice has a tendency to mellow out or get to the point where it will break up. Then as it moves down the pan, the heat will increase in the furnace. As you can see, the farther down it comes, the hotter it gets and the more it cooks. Then we go from a raw juice into a semi-syrup, which is in this area here. And then after we go through the semi-syrup area, it comes down here into the finished product. Now this green that you see on the pan is the pulp that is in the juice, and just the ingredients in the juice itself that cooks out. And this steam you see, this will cook down about 10 to 1, and for every 10 gallons comes in down here, we'll have 9 gallons go out in steam and 1 gallon off this end.
So you have a major evaporation process. I counted, I think, 21 chambers in this pan.
21 bars.
I see. So it goes back and forth, losing water as it goes, and therefore thickening.
Works its way through.
And the color goes from green as pies, as they used to say, all the way down to an amber, and I guess it gets even darker than that in some cases.
True. This end of the pan is about 1 inch higher than that end. Therefore, the product pushes itself up the pan, and as it pushes itself up, it gets thicker, and we lose the green, and we come into the amber or the caramel color.
Now, other than just taste, are there other reasons that you need to thicken it and cook it down? In other words, what is the major reason for cooking other than just taste?
Okay, to cook the syrup down, you need to cook it to about 110 degrees centigrade or about 228 Fahrenheit to remove enough moisture so that the syrup is pure enough that it will keep. That it keep on a shelf, or you can can it, or it will stay for a year or 2 years, or maybe indefinitely.
So it really helps to preserve it. In other words, if you left it in juice form, it would spoil?
It would ferment, true.
Okay. Then you'd have sorghum wine instead of sorghum molasses,
sorghum
I guess,
wine, right.
Well, Betty, you're skimming off, I guess is what that's called.
Yes.
And this green froth, of course, doesn't have any practical use, I suppose. But what happened to your skimming hole?
Well, we did away with that. I think too many people fell in.
I know when I was a kid, that was the old-time version of Macho Man, if you could shove your partner into the skimming hole. So we don't want any of that out here today, I don't guess.
No, I'm afraid I'd be the one to go in it.
Well, thanks a lot for explaining this process to us. It's a really interesting way to make sweetener, and it looks like we're going to have a whole lot of it from this crop.
Okay, thank you. It's nice to be here.
Well, Bob, looks like you're getting awfully scientific on us here. That looks a whole lot like a chemistry lab more than a sorghum stir-off. What in the world is that?
Well, we're trying to bring the chemistry lab out just a little bit. The graduated cylinder here with the green is a sample of the juice as it comes from the mill. And what we're using here is a hydrometer that will give us an approximation of the sugar content of the juice. And this tells us about when it's ready to harvest. We'd like to see it about 15 or 16% sugar. And we take the little hydrometer and drop it in the juice, and finally it'll settle down and give us a reading as to the percentage of sugar. Now the other one over here,
that's genuine sorghum.
That is genuine. That's the genuine product right there. And we can use another hydrometer that's calibrated a little bit differently to check and see if we have the syrup condensed to the level that it ought to be.
I see.
And if it reads from 35 to 37 on this hydrometer, then we know that we have processed it to the point where it is going to be good, and it'll keep.
Okay, now that is percentage of sugar content.
No, this is not percentage of sugar
that's
content.
different.
This one is.
Okay.
This just measures the sort of the viscosity.
I see. What accounts for the drastic change in color from green to amber?
The process right behind us here, coming in the end of the pan over here is the green juice, and by the time it's moved down the pan and been condensed down, about 9 gallons of water removed from it, then we get this nice amber, sweet, delicious material that we call sorghum molasses.
Right, now I'm ready for the biscuits and butter, man. You got me all revved up. Thanks a lot. Well, we've certainly enjoyed having you with us on this segment of Our Appalachia. It's been a real special day as we've taken in sorghum making at the farm, Morehead State University. We hope you'll join us again as we take up another interesting aspect of the mountain history and culture around us.